Thank you, John Paul. Well, are we all feeling optimistic? I am. I think I'm feeling rationally optimistic. And I think there's one big message that I've taken away from today, and that is that nature is really resilient. Given a chance, nature rebounds. We've seen that in just all the stories we've just seen. We've seen it over and over again today, which is a really important message that we need to continue to promote in everything that we do. And it's the kind of thing that keeps me going. I want to tell you a little story. I want to start with a story about this guy, I think, Edgar. This is Edgar Emoji, if you couldn't tell. Edgar has a PhD. He's a conservation biologist. And he has a smiley emoji face, of course, because he is an optimist, because there's nothing to be gained in pessimism. There's only things to be gained in being optimistic. I feel that strongly, and I know Edgar does as well. Let me introduce you to Edgar's family. Edgar has your typical angsty 15-year-old teen. Happens to be a girl. She's a couple months away from getting her license, and she's thinking she's going to drive the Prius. Not going to happen. He's also got an 11-year-old son who loves to stuff his stinky soccer socks behind the pillow. He never puts his plate away, and he can eat a whole pound of bacon in one sitting. And his lovely, very thoughtful, very smart wife, who might be here, right next to him. Edgar is your typical scientist. He overthinks most things. And so when he sits down at the table to have dinner, he thinks about everything on that table. So he thinks about where that food comes from. And he thinks about the row crops that it took to produce that bread. In fact, the fact that 11% of the Earth's surface is made up in row crops, things like wheat, barley, a variety of things. But that's what it takes to produce that bread. And that 26% of the Earth's surface is devoted to permanent pasture to produce livestock, things like cows or pigs or goats or sheep. And then that 1% of the Earth's surface is devoted towards permanent crops, things like coffee or citrus. He also knows that the greenhouse gases that are emitted from all of these agricultural products are actually greater than cars, the greenhouse gases that come from cars, trains, automobiles, and trucks combined. So it's a pretty significant issue. Edgar keeps thinking, because he's an obsessive thinker. He's a scientist, right? So he's always thinking about these things all the time. He thinks about, well, we're looking at about 9.7 billion people coming down the pike at 2050. So Edgar's family is going to grow with all his emoji friends. And that also means that by 2050, we're going to need at least a doubling of our food that's produced on the Earth's land in 2050. That means increasing our calories by about 70%. That's significant. That's not doable like if we could continue to produce food like we produce today. We've got to come up with some innovative ways, some new thinking about how we produce food if we want to meet the demands of the human population, if that's what we're going to do, if we're not going to stop reproduction. The numbers are pretty straightforward. So let's take one of those things on that table, coffee, and see if there isn't some innovative way that we can use coffee to minimize our impact on the Earth and maximize our impact on nature. Edgar, again, is obsessive about thinking about numbers and things, so he knows that about 64% of Americans drink at least 1 cup of coffee daily. On average, they drink 3 cups of coffee. And at conferences like this, they drink about 10 cups of coffee. And these cups of coffee here, Ruth, cost about $10 a piece. I know that. I've done one of these conferences. That's a lot of coffee. So when you think about that globally, that's about 900 billion cups of coffee consumed worldwide. And that number is increasing. In fact, it's expected to increase by 25% from 2015 to 2020. Coffee drinking is really increasing in parts of Latin America. It's increasing in China. It's increasing in India. So we're looking at massive increases in the amount of coffee that's being drunk. That means more increases in the amount of land that's being turned over to agriculture for coffee. That makes it the second most traded commodity in the world, in the developing world, second only after oil, more than natural gas, more than sugar, and a variety of other commodities that you would have thought were more important than coffee. Coffee is important. It's very important. Its value to the coffee industry is estimated at being around $173 billion a year. It is a tremendous industry. And it eats up, or uses about 10.5 million acres of land around the tropics, both in the New World and in the Old World. But this can be a happy story, because coffee used to be grown in a way under trees and forest. That was a traditional way of growing coffee that had minimal impact on nature. This is a postcard from Dr. Emoji's granddad from around 1960. And what it shows is how coffee was grown, sort of a rustic environment, in a traditionally grown environment, under a rich shade canopy with subcanopy. This was a really good environment for birds, for insects, for wildlife. These habitats provided corridors for animals to move. They provided really rich soils. They didn't need to use you don't need to use fertilizers and inorganic or pesticides in these sorts of environments. You can grow everything organically. And then in around 1970, as the demand for coffee increased, we hybridized coffee, and so they would be more productive. But they also had to be grown in a sun situation. In those environments, we started to create more and more environments that were deforested, like this. And these environments, not only were they bad for wildlife, it was bad for the soils. Soils lost their integrity. In these environments, it required a lot of inorganic fertilizers and a lot of pesticides. So it was creating a pretty bad situation. There's at least some skimpy trees here in this situation, but most of coffee is actually grown in a monoculture like this, which is always or usually not organic, and it has no benefit for wildlife whatsoever. But we don't have to grow coffee like this. We can actually grow coffee in that traditional forested situation, in an agroforestry situation. My predecessor at the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center and colleague, who's now deceased, Russ Greenberg, used to wander around the forests of Central America in the 1970s and 1980s, and he spent a lot of time in these coffee agroforestry systems. And he recognized that when there were trees on top of these coffee, you could actually quantify when these trees and when this situation mimicked a natural forest. And he quantified that with science. We keep hearing the same theme over and over again, how important science is to this conservation story, and we can't forget that. Russ did that. He actually quantified the science. He quantified the canopy that was required, the subcanopy that was required, the species diversity that was required in the trees themselves. And he created a certification. He brought it to the marketplace, and it's called Smithsonian Bird-Friendly Coffee. This is actually a new certification that we're just coming out with in this year. But this is key, so people can actually see this brand and they know they're buying coffee that was grown in a forested situation. This coffee now is sold or is grown by over 1,400 farmers around the world. The production of coffee, or the number of farms that are actually growing this, has grown by 5 times over the last 10 years. We are in 11 different countries: Mexico, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Panama, Ethiopia, Thailand, and it's growing rapidly. And it's not just about the biodiversity it protects. It actually provides a really solid income for the farmers that actually grow this coffee. And there are over 25 million people that make their living through different aspects of that coffee chain. This is Victor Romeo Cobon. He is 51 years old. He's been growing coffee since he was 21 years old, over 30 years. And he's part of a cooperative. His farm is part of a cooperative in Guatemala called Guayab. Most of that entire cooperative is organic, and there's several bird-friendly farms in this cooperative. Victor owns one of those. And Victor really values being part of this, not only because he gets between 5 cents and 50 cents a pound more on the green bean in different years. Coffee prices vary incredibly from year to year. But he also feels really strongly that it's necessary for people to feel like they're contributing and leaving the world a better place when he leaves. We all feel that. I feel that. It's a really important thing. The coffee chain is a complex one. The grower is one end of that chain, and it's important to make sure people across that entire value chain understand and appreciate the importance of this commodity. Berry House is one of those examples that is a recent roaster and distributor of Smithsonian bird-friendly coffee. They're in New Jersey. But their CEO really values sustainability. To him, it's important and worthwhile investing in cooperatives like Guayab. He buys from Guayab, who produce quality coffee and continue to seek sustainability of their product. They've now taken Smithsonian bird-friendly coffee and not only roast it and produce it for regular outlets, but they've now created a recyclable K-cup, which in itself is a unique thing, because most K-cups are plastic and are horrible. Do not buy plastic K-cups. But these are recyclable K-cups. They're actually sustainable. So he's taking this product and reaching new markets with our bird-friendly coffee, with our Smithsonian bird-friendly coffee. Not only that, Berry House is going even further, and they're working really directly, not only buying the product from the farmers, but they're going down there and, in this case, donating 2,500 pounds of organic fertilizers back to those farms. So there's this wonderful relationship back and forth between this roaster in New Jersey and this farm down in Guatemala, all these farms in Guatemala. It's wonderful. But again, remember that supply chain. There's the grower, then there's the roaster and the distributor, but there's also this need to create this demand. If we don't have the demand, the links are going to fall apart. We've got to have people here that know what certification means, that know that they've got to buy that if they want to make a difference. And so promoting this and creating marketing opportunities and communicating this importance is really essential. And that's also what we're doing. And so now you can find Berry House, Birds and Beans, Cafe Ibis, Allegra early bird morning coffee, in a variety of places. Places like Whole Foods, Walmart, Nordstrom's, Amazon, and Kroger, and many other places. But that's key. All those pieces of that supply chain and demand are really important for this to be successful. So what's also exciting is that we can now look at this coffee situation and say, this is a model that's working. We're really getting this to work, and it's really starting to grow. And we can take this model and we can apply it to other things, like grapes and vineyards, rice, important for shorebirds and a variety of other things, and cacao forests, chocolate. And by doing this, it's bird-friendly, fun for everybody, and it's more reasons to be optimistic. Thank you very much.